In this video, we're going to be talking about some Sixers trade deadline targets that are realistic. Let's go. Intro.
Pull-up jumper. It's good. Tobias Harris sinks it. Here's Embiid. There it is. Yes! Bamboo. Landing for two on the break. Take that, Tyler Johnson.
So at the halfway point in the season, the Sixers currently sit at first in the Eastern Conference. But things can always change because the Nets are continuing to acquire pieces to try to make their roster even better than it already is in order for them to kind of try to pass us and get that first seed in the Eastern Conference and make their team as good as possible. So, example of a player they just added, the Nets just signed Blake Griffin for the rest of the year. So... Even as the Sixers sit in first in the Eastern Conference, there still are clear problems and deficiencies with the team. There's plenty of places that Daryl Morey can look to fill out before the trade deadline. So the first guy the Sixers could go after is Will Barton from the Denver Nuggets. So today we got a report that says the Sixers have already inquired about him. They're in trade talks with the Nuggets about possibly acquiring Will Barton. And I think this would be a good move for the team. He'd be an upgrade at the 3 spot over Danny Green. He can create more from that spot. Obviously, Danny Green can't really create for himself at all. Will Barton can do that a little bit more. He's shooting a career-high percentage from 3 this season at 38%. And we all know this team needs shooting bolstered in order to help the team moving forward. So that would definitely be a nice piece to add. He just has all-around solid. He has an all-around solid game. And would be a really good role player for the Sixers team. So I guess an offer that we could put out for him would be Mike Scott, Terrence Ferguson, Tony Bradley, and a first-round pick. I think this is solid compensation for a team that's underperformed this year. Will Barton's kind of having a down year in terms of scoring, but that's a lot to do with, I think, the Michael Porter Jr. kind of taking his spot, and maybe they're trying to move on from Will Barton. So I think that that's solid compensation, especially getting a first-round pick for a player of Will Barton's caliber. Another potential very realistic target for the Sixers would be PJ Tucker from the Houston Rockets. So it's very clear that the Sixers are the favorite to land him at this trade deadline. There's been reports saying NBA execs believe that he's going to end up in Philadelphia. I think a report came out today that said he would relish the chance to play in Philadelphia. And I just think he'd be a really good addition for this team. We obviously need a backup for. That's one of our needs as a team, and he would provide that. He also would provide he's a 3-and-D player. He can play good defense, then he can hit the 3. His numbers have been down this year, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's a veteran player and Houston's been pretty not good this season. I feel that it has a lot to do with that instead of him just falling off completely as a player. That being said, I wouldn't pay too much for him. He is a good locker room presence and just a veteran that would help the bench, but I still wouldn't pay too much for him because he is 35 years old. So that being said, I think a report came out that said they've been in talks that would net Houston a second-round pick, and I think that should just be the offer. Second-round pick. To be honest, they can't really get very much else. Like, if you want to throw in, like, I don't know, like a really low-end bench player, like maybe Vincent Poirier, I guess maybe you could do that, but aside from that, you can't really offer much else for a 35-year-old aging veteran whose numbers are down, but I do think he can come to a contending team and help out a lot. To add on to that, I guess Victor Oladipo is another name to keep an eye on for the Sixers. So Houston's apparently being reported to being like, they're trying to sell and get rid of everyone at the deadline, as they are kind of in that tanking position now as a team. Oladipo just turned down a contract extension, so it would be a good move potentially for the Sixers to go out and try to bring in Victor Oladipo, although he does become a free agent after this season. This is probably a lot more unrealistic than most of the other trades I'm going to have on here. But just potentially saying that we could get Victor Oladipo, because there haven't really been any real reports, but just speculation, he'd be a very good fourth additional all-star caliber starting player next to Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris. All 4 of them would be kind of a big 4, I guess you could call that. And he'd obviously be a very quality player as long as he stays healthy, as he has had his issues with health in the past. He's just a good all-around player. The potential offer for both players, to bring both players to Philadelphia, could be Danny Green, Terrence Ferguson, and Mike Scott, plus a first-round pick and a second-round pick, and that could give us back the return of Victor Oladipo and PJ Tucker, although I highly doubt Victor Oladipo is an actual realistic trade target. But let's move on to the next player. So another player the Sixers could look to add at the deadline would be George Hill of the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think this would be a good move for a team that needs to add to their bench and just their bench depth. So George Hill would come in and be a very good backup point guard to Ben Simmons. He can, ball handle. He can create for others. He can just run the offense. In total, he's a veteran. He's been to the NBA Finals before. He's been to the Eastern Conference Finals. He knows what it takes to win, and I think that'd be a good presence for the bench to have, as long as he's also putting up steady stat contributions as well on the team coming off the bench. So a potential trade offer for him would be Mike Scott, Vincent Poirier, and a second-round pick. I don't think you'd really need to give up much else for him, as, again, the Thunder in kind of a tanking mode, just trying to get rid of assets, get whatever they can for them. And George Hill is also on the older side as well. Another player that the Sixers could add that would fill the same role that George Hill would if we potentially got him is Delon Wright of the Detroit Pistons. So Delon Wright this year is having a career year, averaging around 11 points and shooting pretty well from the field as well. And he has been a very good point guard for the Pistons. He starts for them, but he would come off the bench for us. He can, again, run the offense like a George Hill could, but he's a little bit younger than George Hill. And basically, you're just adding a solid all-around guard to your bench. You can't really go wrong with that as long as you're not giving up too much. So a potential offer for him would look something like Mike Scott, Terrence Ferguson, and a second-round pick. A lot of these trade offers are just us offering low-end picks, low-end players to get veterans to help just boost our team a little bit, but I think that's the type of thing that we're going to see happens moving towards the trade deadline. But Delon Wright would be a very good addition to the Sixers team. Another potential player from the Pistons that we could get in a package with him that would be really good would be Wayne Ellington. Wayne Ellington would be a less likely acquisition, as I haven't really seen many things talking about this, bringing Ellington to Philadelphia, but I would really like to see that, as this team needs shooting, as we know, especially off the bench, and Wayne Ellington is strictly a three-point shooter. Is pretty much what he is, and he's very good at it. He's having a good year in Detroit, and I think bringing him to Philadelphia would really much help this bench unit, help the entire Sixers team. A package to bring him and Delon Wright to Philadelphia would look something like Mike Scott, Terrence Ferguson, Vincent Poirier, and 2 second-round picks. I think that's plenty of compensation for a player like Wayne Ellington, who's on a 1-year deal, is older, and Delon Wright, who's also enjoying a career year. But I feel that it'd be good, it'd be in best interest for Detroit to maybe look on to move from those players and bring in some additional picks that they can get whenever they can get, and then bring in a player like Terrence Ferguson, who was a former first round draft pick that they could try to revive in Detroit. Yeah, so you see with the Derrick Rose package, all they got was Dennis Smith Jr., who the Knicks had looked like they had given up on, and then a second-round pick. So I feel that we could easily get both of these players for, I feel like, a package that's even better than that. Heading into the next player, we have Larry Nance Jr. from the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think he'd be a really good addition to the team, as well, as we need a backup 4, and he would do just that, fill in the backup 4. He's having a good year. He's averaging around 9 points per game, so steady offensive contributions. He's shooting well from 3 this season. He's been steadily improving that, and his defense is solid. He'd be a solid all-around role player off the bench for this team. And he'd also add a veteran presence, as you don't think of him as like a typical veteran, but he has been to the finals once with LeBron James in Cleveland. So I think he would just know what it takes to get to that point and what it takes to win, and he would bring that to this team as well. An offer for him could look like Mike Scott, Terrence Ferguson, a first-round pick, and a second-round pick. Although I do think this deal would be a little bit tougher to pull off, as Cleveland hasn't really shown much interest in moving on from him. I've seen a report that said that Cleveland knows how much he means to the team and to the fan base, and they might not want to move on from him so quickly. But that being said, if we could somehow figure out a way to get him, I feel like that'd be a nice addition to the team as well. Another player that would fill the same role as a player like Larry Nance Jr. would be Nemanja Bjelica from the Sacramento Kings. So Bielitsa would basically come in and he'd be a good backup for, which is again a position of need for the Sixers. He'd be a good shooter, although this year has been a down year for him from 3, but his career numbers suggest that that will move back up playing for a contending team. Multiple teams have shown interest in him, as much as the Sixers have. So I think that's a name to watch on the trade market as well. He'd pretty much just bring shooting to the team, and that's something that the Sixers really need, as they rank, I think they're in the bottom 3 in three-pointers attempted and made per game. An offer for him could look something like Mike Scott and a second-round pick, as he kind of fell out of the Kings' rotation a little bit and then came back up into it. But the Kings have been disappointing this year. They're around, I think they're 14-21. They're towards the bottom of the Western Conference. No one really expects the Kings to come out of that, as the Western Conference is tough. So adding him for a cheap price like that is a very realistic possibility in my eyes. And then a final player that could potentially be moved, but it's looking more like he's going to stay where he is Kyle Lowry. I just had to mention him because I had made a video on him previously, and then there's been all these rumors surrounding Kyle Lowry to the Sixers. So Kyle Lowry, if he did manage to get to Philadelphia, would be obviously a really good presence for the team. He's been to the NBA Finals, he's won, he's been in the playoffs a ton of times. He's a leader on the team, a vocal leader. He can shoot the 3, he can handle the ball, he can be the point guard, he can run the offense, he can pretty much do everything, and he's a solid defender. The only downside, if you were to acquire him, would be what you have to give up and his age and his contract, because his contract does end at the end of this season. That being said, an offer for him would look something like Danny Green, Terrence Ferguson, Mike Scott, Tyrese Maxey, and a first-round pick. This is a heavy price that you would have to pay to bring in a player that is on a team that is still reportedly looking to win, and that means so much to that Raptors organization. They would want a young player in Maxey, which would be difficult to part ways with, but you do get back, obviously, an all-star caliber point guard in Kyle Lowry. All that being said, it is probably highly unlikely that Lowry is moved. There's been conflicting reports about it the entire time. When the rumors first came up that Lowry wanted to go to Philadelphia, immediate reports coming that just shot that down and was like, no, he never said that. There's no real reliable source that's coming out and saying Kyle Lowry is going to be traded. And then today there was a report that came out from a Raptors source that specifically said that Lowry most likely or definitely is not going to be moved at the deadline. That being said, things can always change, and you never know the reliability of sources that aren't Woj and Shams. So, Kyle Lowry would be a great addition to the team, but I still feel that it is pretty unrealistic. Look for the Sixers to be active at the trade deadline this season with Daryl Morey as the president of basketball operations. If they can pull off one or a few of these moves, that would give them another boost to continue to make that push for the 1 seed and to try to get best position possible to make a run to the NBA Finals and compete with other teams in the East like the Brooklyn Nets and Blake Griffin. If you want to check out some of my other content like mixes, I'll leave a link to my latest mix right up here. You can go check that out. And if you want to watch some more of my mixes and hype videos and things like that, you can check that out here. And make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this, informative videos, sports talk, and player mixes and hype videos. So that being said, thank you all for watching, and see you in the next video.